So just a little recap. Scott and I have, for a long time, been discussing things about the church, how to really try and be the best church we can be in a 21st century context. Are we still in the 21st century?
We're in the 21st century.
Yeah, right? We're not in the 22nd century.
Luke,
is this the 22nd century? No, not yet. Okay.
No, we're in the 21st. You're gonna be with the Lord by the time the 22nd century comes around.
Hey, healthcare is improving. You never know. All right, so
you just lost us all credibility.
Sorry. So, anyways. Oh, so we've talked a lot about stuff with the church and all that, and recently we read a book that just kind of reinvigorated that conversation, and we wanted to just kind of create a space where y'all could share your thoughts with us, and I thought last week was really good. We had a pretty overall positive response last week. We did have some concerns. Someone had voice feeling a little bit anxious about it all, maybe feeling like we're, I don't know, almost like we need to be more confident that, we're doing a good job, and I don't know if it seemed like we were, how would you say it, Scott, being
no.
overcritical of ourselves?
No, overall, we had a great response last week. Somebody voice being a little anxious, and so I wanted to, rather, I definitely didn't want to ignore that voice, so I wanted to open it up because maybe other people here are feeling anxious about that discussion as well. They had mentioned in the conversation also the discussion we had back in December about the church, and I know a lot of that stuff was, some very anxious topics. So, just wanted to give a moment before we went into some other questions, and again, this is a safe space, and if there's any anxiety around it or any clarifying questions anybody has about all this, I would love to open it up and give you the opportunity to discuss that. Does that make sense? I know a lot of times people, if you are feeling anxious, you might not want to voice it right now.
In front of everybody. Yeah.
It's like, that's Scott, I'm feeling anxious, so I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to bring it up, especially in public.
Yeah, sure. Well, and I was just going to say, in all seriousness, we want to be, approachable and open book. So if anything we do, makes you feel anxious or you're concerned about anything, come and ask us. And we're open to feedback. We're open to pushback on what we're doing. So we're just trying to figure it out,
Yeah,
So,
and if nobody has anything but you're feeling a little bit of anxiety, you said, sending a text, but talk to us.
Yeah.
Even one-on-one if you don't want to talk about it publicly. One, I want to make sure everybody understands. Last week we did an introduction. Not going to go into that so much this week, but I just want to reassure you guys, we're not changing everything that we do about church. We're just trying to look at the church and see what fits best in our context. What's the healthiest way to do church in our context. We looked at the first century, which is much different than it is now, and then we shared how over the last 2,000 years, everything the way that the modern church, the way we do church, a lot of it has come post-Bible. So it looked completely different. People were meeting in homes, and there was a discussion like this. And so rather than just go all the way back to the first century, say what's the healthiest way to do church in our 21st century context. That makes sense?
22nd century.
In our 22nd century context.
Yeah, and it's, we're learning and growing just along with everybody else, so it's going to be a constant thing for us. And so I wanted to invite you all into it. But yeah, like Scott said, we're not about to make drastic changes. And we are doing this kind of discussion because we want to hear from y'all's perspectives. I wrote down some stuff last week I thought was really great from some of the stuff y'all shared. Hoping to do that again this week. So yeah, all that to say, if y'all have any concerns, feel free to approach us. And yeah, so let's move on. So second question we're going to tackle is, it's like this. How do we help one another see all of life as worship and ministry, not just what happens on Sundays? And this question is really, I think, for all of us to share with each other ideas and insights of how we can make this happen. So just something to kind of set the stage. When you think of the word revival, what do you think of? And if you don't have to say it out loud. If you want to share something, you can, and we'll bring the mic to you. But what do you think of when you hear the word revival?
Revival.
You say revival?
Mm-hmm. Revival.
Revival.
Yeah.
Renewing of your mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I actually like that answer a lot, but I'll save my comments till later.
That's great. Yeah. Just envision a revival in your head.
When I was a kid, revival always meant like big old tent meetings.
Say that again.
I said when I was a kid, when I heard the word revival, it was always in context of tent.
10 meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Billy Graham days, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Billy,
exactly what I
Billy
think.
Sunday and
Every time I hear that word, I think, just with the context of when I was growing up and things like that.
That's exactly what I think a lot of people think of when they hear the word revival. I know if you were raised in a Baptist church, it's probably what you think of,
Well, I was raised in full gospel Pentecostal churches,
sure.
and I thought
Yeah.
of it as like a multi-service. If we were doing church more than once a week, it was revival.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for me as a kid, that meant like, dang, we're gonna have to be there every day.
So,
But you had food. Always had food at the revival.
Did we every night? Did we?
Yeah.
I'm looking at my mom. Okay.
He wasn't Baptist.
oh yeah,
I mean, we did have a lot of food. I just didn't remember if we had them at the
Pentecostals
revivals
are
or
like,
not.
we're fasting during revival.
No, the difference between us and the Baptists, like when we had church, it just didn't end for 4 hours.
Yeah.
And when the Holy Spirit kicked in, I feel guilty for that too. I was like, dang, we're going to be here a while. Sorry, I'm just being authentic. All right, back to the discussion.
So, I think revival in reality is when it can happen through a series of meetings or whatever, but it's when the people of God become revived in their purpose and their devotion to the Lord. That's real revival, not just exciting meetings. And I think revival, at least partly, is when the people of God become enthused again with their role in the church, in loving Christ's body. It doesn't have to be a lot of fireworks or emotion. When we all take seriously our call to be the church and love each other as the church, that's revival. It doesn't have to come with a bang and with an amazing meeting. It can come quietly when the church takes up its responsibility to love each other. And that's part of why we want to do this, these talks and this consideration. Hebrews 10:24 and 25 says this: "Let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as we see the day drawing near." And so this first question is just that, let's consider, how do we stir up one another to love and good works? And so I just want to put that question out there again and ask y'all, what do y'all think? Share ideas with each other right now. Raise your hand, we'll bring you the mic. What are ways that we can help each other to see all of life as worship and ministry and not just what happens on Sundays? What are ways we can do that personally? What are ways we can do that for each other? What do y'all think?
I think sometimes you need another person to speak into your life on that, because sometimes you're like, no, I don't have a thing that I do, but sometimes someone else will see you, from the back of the room, in the front of the room, and sharing the things that you see in others that they might not be able to see in themselves. And that will help sometimes.
Yeah, calling out the things you see in others so they don't see themselves. That's cool. I mean, that's a great one right there. So another way to put it could be, how can we call out the good that we see in others that they might not see in themselves?
So
I think sometimes it looks like inviting people to what you're doing, what you've got going on, a ministry you're passionate about. I also think sharing what's going on in your life. You talked to this coworker at lunch and the conversation went great. Like, just, it encourages that mindset, because I think sometimes we get so busy we forget. And so if you're inviting or sharing what's going on in your life, I think that that's helpful to other Christians around you to be encouraged and invited to partake in what you've got going on if they don't have anything going on.
Absolutely. That's so good. I think because Sunday morning has become, in many ways, many places, like sort of a thing you go to, it's easy to be like, hey, how you doing? It's like, oh, I'm good, and then just go find your seat. Taking that extra time to try and be honest about your week and how you're doing is powerful. I think it starts conversations that you wouldn't have otherwise, and can help foster that deepness. That's really good.
I was just thinking about Tim Mackey from the Bible Project talks about like when you see the things of heaven merge with the things of earth, right? And those spaces overlap, that he calls that's revelation, that's apocalypse. That's what he says, like the apocalypse now. And I think for me, like when I can try to start my day in the mindset of like looking for those moments, and like I just get so encouraged, because then all these little moments throughout my day, like I am getting, what was the word you used? Like revived, I guess, like revival in my spirit, because it's just like, oh, this is a God moment. And it might just be like seeing somebody act like Christ, or it might be, I don't know, there's just so many opportunities to see it if you're like looking for it. And remembering to look for it is definitely the hard part. But I feel like when I kind of set my mind to do that, then like throughout my day, I'm able to like worship, because it's just like all these moments where you see the things of heaven here on earth, like growing. So
that's awesome. Yeah.
You should use the word apocalypse. Use the word apocalypse, right? Yeah. Many don't know. It means to reveal something. So you're revealing Christ to the world. That's actually apocalypse. We think about zombies or apocalypse doesn't necessarily mean end times.
So I love that you said that, Katie, because one of the questions I had here was to kind of clarify. This one was like, what are some things that you do personally that help you maintain an eternal perspective and remember your purpose? If anybody wants to share that as kind of encouragement to everyone, what are some things you do that help you maintain an eternal perspective and remember your purpose?
As you look around, everywhere you're working, there's everybody. I mean, I can look at anybody in there. Somebody just found out they had cancer. There's something like that. And I was also raised up Pentecostal. We went in revival. We didn't think, kind of felt like you didn't have church if somebody didn't, wasn't not literally flipping over pews and all that mess, you know what I mean? But but I think the day that we're heading in now, I think we need to meet people where they're at, and legalistically speaking, whatever, we look down on people like, just the way it was. I mean, if they came in, boy, and they smelled like cigarette smoke or something like that, we just kind of, it was just meet people where they're at. I think that's the most important thing. You don't got to sit here and preach and pound on them. Just live it with your daily life and let them see it.
Yeah, good stuff.
That's so cool. Wow, I love that answer. You talk about maintaining eternal perspective. I've heard before the idea that, like, remember when you, in the Old Testament, how when they went into the temple, it was a very special and holy thing, and, like, you didn't mess around at the temple, like you were in the presence of God. When you look at another human being nowadays, you're looking at the temple of God, whether God is dwelling in them now or not. That is a temple of God. And taking the time to see people as people, regardless of where they're at in life, regardless of what things they may be involved in, but seeing them as a person is huge. And that, like you say, helps you remember that eternal perspective. That's really cool.
Good stuff.
Hey, Luke. Hey, I was going to say, some of y'all have heard me say this before, but I like to start my day asking the Lord to give me eyes to see and ears to hear what he's doing, just to heighten that awareness. And it's very helpful. I mean, I feel like he shows me a lot more when I ask, or I see a lot more. I mean, I think he's always wanting to show us what he's doing. He's inviting us all the time into kingdom stuff. We just get distracted or whatever, and we don't perceive it. But and then there's times where we don't even realize what impact we're having on someone, just living our life, being who we are. And if you're fortunate, someone will tell you that, some days that you made such a difference in my life, or you changed the atmosphere in our office, just by your presence here. So.
Yeah, it's good, Sally.
No kidding. Ask and you shall receive. It's really good.
So,
go ahead. Sorry.
Your original question was, how do you keep focused on what God has planned for you? Was that essentially it?
Yeah. So, kind of clarifying this one, I just asked, what are some things you do that help you maintain an eternal perspective and remember your purpose?
I mean, one thing for me is to realize how tempting idols can be in my life. For instance, my whole life's goal has been to be one specific thing in my profession. And it wasn't until I realized what an idol it had become in my life and giving it up to the Lord that he was able to remind me about why he put that in my heart in the first place.
Yeah.
So
That's good. Brandon, something you said will actually tie in with what I wanted to say. I was thinking about Friday night. First of all, I forgot to announce that. I thought that was a slide. Anyways, we had Music on a Mission on Friday night and raised funds for His Glory Children's Home, and we raised $1,500 for the children's home. Yeah, and it was packed out. That was the most people we've ever had in this building. So it was a great time. But one of the things I thought about, and the worship was great, and the time we spent together, it was wonderful. And Carson Cooper's a very gifted young man. But with that said, that's just a form of worship. Like what Katie and Luke and Sabrina did up here and leading worship, that's just a form of worship. And I think, too, unintentionally, but I think that's the church can be the root problem of, the way we do church and stuff like that, for seeing worship in the wrong way, because I think a lot of people in the streets, you ask them what worship is, it's like, oh, it's what you do on Sunday mornings before the preaching starts. And praise is just a form of worship that we do collectively, corporately, together. You had mentioned renewing your mind. What's your name again? Rusty. Rusty mentioned renewing your mind. Just the verse before that in Romans 12:1, I think gives us a lot of context. Paul writes, he says, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. And the Bible talks about us doing everything for the glory of God. So the way I see that is like everything I do can be worship. It's all an attitude, right? It's how we do it. What I take in and enjoy, the good things in life is worship. What I reject, what I put off, that's what you were saying, like putting off those idols, the things that have control of me, or those things that God doesn't want for me, that is worship, right? So literally everything we do can be an act of worship. Of course, as imperfect human beings, we know that in our day, everything doesn't end up being an act of worship, but that's the way to live our lives. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's great. We should move on. We could talk. There's so much in this question, but so just to wrap this one up so we can get to the next one, I just want to encourage y'all this week to consider how can you recenter on your eternal perspective, how you can recenter on worshiping God in every facet of your life, and then also how you can encourage those around you to center on Jesus, encourage them towards the Lord, to spur one another on to love and good works. I think if we just did that this week, that would be amazing. And I want to say, I think all y'all are doing that already. So I just want to encourage y'all to do it more and more. So, yeah. Sure. Absolutely.
You know, I loved every perspective in here this morning. Those perspectives refreshed my thoughts on that subject. And, you know, one of the things I've been thinking about lately is in the area of suffering. And in suffering and in heartache, that's just part of the human experience. We can still bring glory to God. We can still have an eternal perspective, or put forth that eternal perspective in our lives and how we operate in this world. I mean, look, you know, reading the Psalms the book of Psalms is a book of worship. When you look at it, all the grief, there's joys that are shared, but there's also absolute grief. But they are taking it to God within that context of eternal perspective.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Warren. Appreciate it, buddy. All right, next question. We talked about this a few weeks ago, I think, during the Ask the Pastors. Wanted to revisit it a little bit. How do we help one another? How can we give generously to support our church without slipping into legalistic views about tithing? I feel like every time that question is asked, I feel like I need to preach a whole sermon about it again because there's so much context and people, you know, new people come in or whatever and like, what? What do you mean? You know, tithing isn't like, what? You know, so anyways, I don't want to preach another sermon about it, so I'm going to assume a lot of you guys have a little bit of context. In short, the Old Testament law, there was a tithe. There was actually 3 tithes. Won't go into all that detail again. But we're not under the Mosaic law at all anymore. We're in a new covenant. You know, Old Covenant, New Covenant. And so how do we, as a church, in the New Testament church, they just shared everything that they had. Remember, church was different back then. Remember we said they were meeting in houses and they just, like, they actually had communal living. They would share, you know, everything. If Sonia was in need, you know, we would all come together and say, okay, well, let's give of our resources and help Sonia out, you know. If Abby was in need, okay, let's, you know, if I was in need, then all you guys would say, okay, how can we help them? And that's the way the church functioned. So there's that, but then, you know, you fast forward 2,000 years and we're meeting in Old Town Spring and in this building together, and there's rent and there's electricity, you know, and then we give like 10% to different missions organizations, you know. We have a small salary, but we have a salary, you know, there's just different, and then, you know, all the different, we're spending all the time on things for the church and doing ministry and stuff like that. So again, going back to the question, how do we give generously to support our church without slipping into legalistic views about tithing? Does that make sense?
And then start with prayer.
Start with prayer? Okay, that's good. Robbie?
So I think that giving has to come from your personal perspective, of course, but I think finding areas of opportunity to plug in. We do lots of events here. I'm thrilled about that, by the way. That is my love language for sure. And so I see that as a part of giving, you know, a giving of your personal self, your time, your talents. And I think everyone here does that really well. And I know from personally speaking with a few that they look for opportunities to where to plug in and how to help. And so I don't think it's always just a monetary thing for sure. Monetarily, yes, I do find joy in giving to my church, knowing that we are helping keep the doors open and the lights on, and we have heat in the winter and air conditioning in the summer. But I also think that, you know, I'm not keeping track of every little penny that I'm spending on event supplies. I don't really care. It's like if I'm out and about and I say, oh, look at that, and I'll grab that and I will put it in my shopping cart and I bring it to the church. You know, I don't personally buy everything out of my own pocket, of course, for all the events, but I do like to do that. I do like to just give, you know, spontaneously. But I also think there is a measure of just your personal engagement with others to, they don't know that we're here. I love asking when we get visitors, how'd you find us? It's not by walking through Old Town Spring, believe it or not. Most of it is through logging on and looking online and finding our church that way. But word of mouth is a huge thing, you know, here. And when we share, you know, and we invite, and I think that also, you know, that benefits us as a church body, you know, other bodies to commune with. So there are lots of ways I think that, you know, we support our church that's beyond just, you know, monetarily giving. But and if you don't have an area that you are plugged into, come see me. I'll plug you in.
Ariel's back there.
So I grew up in a church environment where, like, you were sinning if you were not giving 10% of your income. And it was so frowned upon. It was almost like, are you even really saved if you're not, like, meeting that level of giving? And so once I, like, moved out of that environment and, like, started to find freedom, it turned into this, well, I don't have to, so why bother? And then, like, gradually over time, I've kind of slipped with it and trying to get back into it. But the thing that, like, motivates me to want to give from the heart is being connected and, like, really identifying with, it's not just being, like, a Christian. Like, it's just different when you realize that you're actually, I don't know why I'm getting so emotional. I'm sorry. When you realize you're actually, like, a part of a family, like, your identity, like, you're not just having to do this because you gave your life to God. Like, you want to invest in your family here and in Christ's body. Like, it just, for me, that's what changed it to become, like, an actual genuine, like, I don't have to do this, but I actually want to.
It's giving out of joy and not out of obligation or fear of punishment. Yeah, that's cool.
Anybody else? Like I said, I know we revisited somebody. Okay, Sally?
I was just going to say, for me personally, I find it helpful. I mean, I have my baseline, you know, and I don't feel legalistic about it. It's just, that's me. I have a baseline, and sometimes I enjoy giving more than that baseline. And so it's helpful to me when you share a specific need there is, you know, that just gives me an opportunity to give more generously.
Yeah, that's good.
I hope I'm not speaking out of place, but I think from what I've heard Scott and Luke say here about tithing and having legalistic views about it, you know, I don't know if anybody recently saw the pastor that closed his congregation in the church this week trying to raise $40,000, had the ushers lock the doors.
Wow.
What?
You didn't see that story? You should look it up. That's wild. Y'all should do a Holy Toast reaction to that.
Wow, definitely.
But we don't have those views here. Scott and Luke don't project those views here. And so I would say,
That's crazy.
you know, if you're having legalistic, you're struggling with tithing or giving, I would say you really, like the first person said, pray about it. That's the first thing you need to do. You really need to pray about it because we don't have pastors that are locking the doors and making us tithe or even giving us the idea that that's the way to go about tithing, right? So anyway.
It just sounds like that would happen like in the 70s or something, but not.
Last century.
Huh? There? Oh, wow. Oh, that's what they're getting charged with. Oh, wow. Yeah, well.
What?
Yeah, I mean, it should. Justice.
Yeah, that is crazy.
Yeah, man, and I was real and authentic about it, you know, a few weeks ago, and I will be again today. You know, I'm human, and you know, as a pastor, and thankfully I've got Luke sharing the load with me, but you know, you guys know since. Late last year, we've been doing really, really well, and we've been really blessed as a church. But when things are low, it's a lot harder to have these conversations. I've always preached the message that I do on giving, despite low or high. But I'm just saying, like, when I struggle and worry, you know, I'm definitely wrestling a lot more when you're trying to make ends meet. Because the fear is that, you know, you talk about this, and everybody's like, oh, I don't have to give. I'll just give $20, you know, and then there's no support for the ministry or whatever. So, in short, for me, I do see a principle. The baseline, that's for me. I see that there of giving, so that's what I give. And then, and I like what Ariel said about she just loves this church and investment. So for me too, it's like. Yeah, I'm a pastor here, but like this is like, I think the greatest mission field is the church. I mean, the greatest missions organization. Again, support all these other things that God's doing, but this is the one I'm most passionate about. This is God's body that is sent, you know, to go out into the world, and so I believe wholeheartedly in this. So giving out of that passion, and then of course, you know, I do see giving as giving to God, you know, it's ministering to Him, like Jesus says. You know, when we actively do things and we minister to people out in the world, we're ministering to God. I see giving as a part of that. I believe, you know, it makes Him smile, and so, anyways, that's the way I look at it. But you know, despite my humanness in those areas, you know, I refuse to preach a legalistic, you know, you're robbing, you know, God and stuff like that. If y'all want to talk about that passage later, there's a lot of context to that passage that does not have anything to do with how preachers present it. Sometimes, go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
Well, I just think what I heard over the years was all that prosperity preaching, and everybody's supposed to have a jet and airplanes and all that, and that gave people a lot of bad taste in their mouth. You know, me and my dad discussed this a whole bunch. You know, if you're sitting there and you're a multimillionaire and you just automatic, that's the easiest thing for you to do is walk up there and give a 10% check. But if you're praying, you're listening to God, at the end of that year, you're liable to be looking at that gum. I gave about 30-something%, you know, I mean, whatever. You get what I'm saying? I think a lot of that was just ruined over the years, you know, with people's
Devil's at work. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, for sure. Devil's at work. And that's what people will point to. They'll point to the TV preachers and stuff like that, of why they don't like the church, even though that's a very small percentage of what the church is. Oh, we need to move on to the next question.
Yeah, I'll say one thing real quick.
Okay.
I was just about to say we need to move on, but I think I'm not going to speak for you, but I know for my perspective, like I think the pressure we feel as pastors is there's a pressure to succeed, you know, like, and I think especially like how the Heschts have, when you poured so much into building something over years, the fear that it could fall apart is real, you know, and it's challenging. But I think what Scott and I both want is like, so when Paul writes the letter to the Philippians, he's in prison, right? And they send him a gift of resources and stuff through Epaphroditus. And he says to them, now you Philippians know that in the beginning, when I left Macedonia, no churches shared with me concerning giving and receiving, but only you. Even in Thessalonica, you sent once and again to my needs. It's not because I desire a gift, but I desire fruit that may abound to your account. And I think that should be the heart of pastors. It's not like anytime a pastor is trying to get rich or get something for themselves out of the ministry, they're missing it, you know? Paul's in prison, and he's like, I'm not sitting here trying to get something out of y'all. The reason I'm encouraging y'all to give is because I want fruit that abounds to your account. I want you to experience the blessings of generosity. And that's, like Ariel was saying, it's not a death threat anymore. It's like God has promised that if we are generous, he will bless us abundantly. And we want y'all to experience that. We want to experience that, you know, and that's kind of the heart we want to have when we preach about giving. It's like for y'all to be blessed, not to continue anything other than that. And so I think we're both trying to work towards that.
Yeah, good word, man.
So
very good word. This is really a two-part question. We got about 13 minutes. Well, what does it mean to truly belong to a church? Well, I'll start there. What does it mean to belong to a church?
Completely invested
Yeah.
in all aspects of the church.
Let me word it a different way. This may be challenging for somebody, and I'm totally respectful of different views. I just want to preface with that. What does it mean to be a member of a church? That put in a different context?
I think you just have to sign a card.
Yeah. Thanks, Luke. That was what I was getting at.
So,
he was aware of my leading question.
so
Go ahead, Brandon.
I guess a story from the church that I grew up in. So they, from their denominational beginnings, never had church, like a formal church membership. And we also did not believe in reciting creeds.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Wow.
because at that branch of Christianity, they truly believe that if you confessed as Jesus Christ your Savior, and you wanted to experience not the sacrament of communion, but like a fellowship, maybe I should say, with them, then you were considered a member of the church.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
Anybody else? So early on, we did the official membership. I don't know if any of you've noticed. You know what? I haven't had a guest who became a part of this church in a long time. It's weird. I don't know if just culture shifting or what, but used to, like 10 years ago, new people come in, they say, hey, how do I become a member of this church? You know, nobody's asked me that in years. I remember several years ago, I can't remember who it was, somebody asked me about how do I become a member, but nobody's, what's that? No, that's a guest card. That's not a membership card. No, we don't have membership cards. Yeah, that's a guest card. But I tried it. I remember talking early on, Jason Shepard with Church Project, he was meeting with me when we started this church, and he had told me that they didn't do formal membership, and that's the reason, or he had given me the reasons. But in my experience, like signing a card, it's kind of like, signing we still have the leadership covenants and stuff because there's important things that people need to sign and look at. But if people are going to leave a church, they're going to leave a church. If they don't want to be a part of the church, a card's not going to change anything. A class isn't going to change anything. And I've noticed my experience, no difference in whether people sign the card or not. Now, I do acknowledge there are some good reasons to have church membership. like official membership, so I recognize those things, and I've thought through those things. And the reason I say I is because this was instituted before you came.
I wasn't born yet, was I? Wasn't that like? Just kidding. You're not old. I was just kidding.
But for me, it's also this, and again, this isn't a knock because I see it's not a knock. I'm not focusing on other churches, what they're doing. I've always, when people start knocking other churches, no, that's not who we are. We focus on what we're doing. We're not about knocking other churches. But I want us to see that we're not a club, we're a family, right? And I don't sign membership to join a family, right? Mom,
More than 3 times she was a member.
well, I think I've subconsciously adopted that. Yeah, is that where I learned that? Okay, so I don't. Yeah, that's the same way. If you come more than 3 times, you're a member of the family. You're part. I mean, you're already by adoption. That's the point I get to. By adoption of Jesus Christ, you're a part of the family, right? And so that kind of leads to the second part of the family. I mean, the second part of the family. The second part of the question. How can we emphasize practices like baptism as meaningful expressions of that belonging and faith commitment? And what I mean is, I think baptism is, we always say it's a symbol of an inward reality, you know what I mean? And man, today I feel like people argue too much about like, oh, baptism doesn't save, it's just faith, Mm-hmm. I think most of us get that now. But in the Bible, when you believed, you were baptized, right? And I don't think because of our culture, again, you got to fast forward 2,000 years, we're in the 21st century, if somebody in here believes, they're not going to be ready, they're going to not want to get their clothes wet and all that kind of stuff, so we're not going to be able to just baptize them the same day, you know what I mean? Not to mention we don't even have the baptismal full. But I do believe it goes hand in hand. You believe and you are baptized. Mm-hmm. And anyway, sometimes I struggle with how to emphasize that more with people, and even trying to find ways when preaching a sermon and present the gospel is to mention baptism, because I think a lot of people, it's just like, I'm going to accept Jesus into my heart, and then they don't even think about baptism, and then years down the road, they're like, I've never been baptized, you know what I mean? So, anyways, I do think it's through faith, and then baptism being a part of that or a symbol of that we do enter into God's family, and that's how we see the church. Anybody have any comments about that? No?
Can I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
I know we're running short, but I just want to say, so there's this verse in Acts 2 where it says, then those that gladly received the word were baptized, and the same day they were added about 3,000 to their number. And that was kind of it, It was like they believed, they were baptized.
Oh, yeah.
They were part of the
good
church.
Passages, yeah.
But I really like what you said, Sabrina, about being invested. Because, has anybody ever had a distant family member that you haven't seen for a long time, And, you're related, your family, but, that relationship is not there. I think when I was growing up, I saw some of my cousins, 3 times. I couldn't even tell you. If I saw them on the street, I wouldn't even recognize them, And so I think what you see in the Bible, I think a question we should all ask ourselves is, or we should all ask God is, God, how do you want me to be invested in your church, right? Because you're a part of the church by nature of the Holy Spirit. But how does God want you as a member of his body to nourish and cherish the church? There may be some people who God wants them to be a part of 5 or 6 different congregations. I don't think that's automatically wrong. I think what I would just want to ask them is, or what I would want to ask anybody is, have you talked to God about where he wants you to be in the church, I don't think there's a rule that you have to go to one church every Sunday or anything like that. But I do think what we should ask ourselves is, how can I invest in a church in a healthy, dynamic way? How can I really nourish and cherish his body? I think that's what's important.
Yeah, I think, Michael, I'm glad you brought that up because, I technically don't, I mean, there's no rule in the Bible against going to different churches. But my question would be is like, are you getting true community? Right? Because we all know part of this whole thing, this discussion we have, is that we're not meant to just like come here and sit, and that's what church is, and listen to preaching and then go home. Is like, are you invested? So if you're, doing several churches or whatever, are you getting like true Christian community that you can call family? You know what I mean? Are you getting?
That's what I meant by the investment.
Yeah.
It was not just the building,
Yep.
or the tithing of it. It's the community. It's the, where can I serve? Where can I, go beyond that extra mile of just showing up and sitting in a chair.
Yep.
Like you said, we've got children. We've got, Miss Robbie's got other areas that we can all serve in. But that's being invested too, not just your money.
Can I say again? I've said it before. There's two things I want to mention before we close. Are we going to call that the last question? Or
I think we probably should, yeah.
Investment is not just, we need a children's volunteer, okay? I'm going to bring that up again. We definitely need children's volunteers, and there's other areas. Miss Robbie said if you want to plug in, she's got places for you. So there's places to plug in, but I've said it before, we're a small church, 50 people on Sundays, we probably have 80 people, total or whatever. There's not a place for everybody to plug in position-wise in this church, or if you're in a bigger church. Like, your purpose in this world, like, and the way God's gifted you is not for you to be a parking attendant or to be in the hospitality team and make coffee. That's not your calling in life, okay? So the most important thing is investment is not volunteering for Sunday mornings or whatever. It's how are we functioning as the body? What we talked about in the first one, how we worship by serving other people in the world with the gospel. Does that make sense? Yeah, that's the way. We're invested in each other. We love each other well. We bear one another's burdens, and we're a family together. And together, we're letting our light shine. We're being salt and light in the world. That's investment in the church. Like, if you have a separation of church and state, like in your life, like I go to church and then, I don't even live for God until I come back on Sunday morning. That's not what it's about. Investment is you're invested in this church body and out there in the world. Does that make sense? And so the last thing I just wanted to bring back to baptism, because I thought this was really cool. We talk about baptism as a symbol, kind of like we talk about communion as a symbol. And I've often said it sucks because, like, I'm not like the Catholics where I think it's actually, the bread and, is actually the body of Christ, and the wine is the actual blood of Christ. So I don't hold to that, right? And baptism, I don't think, yes, technically it's not what saves you. So we call it a symbol, but I think that falls short. And so for me, baptism, what if we thought of it as a declaration? Colossians 1:13, he has delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son. Do you know in early church days when they were baptized, they knew the spiritual world was watching, and it was a declaration that I no longer belong to you, Satan. I belong to Jesus.
Yeah.
So does that motivate you want to get baptized? If you hadn't been baptized, we can fill up that bucket and we can do it next week. And I just want to encourage you, if you are a believer and you've never been baptized, you really should. You should make that declaration, okay? Cool.